We have the pleasure this morning of having a guest speaker come. This is Pastor Pasha. He's a pastor at a local church here in Bishkek, and we're just very honored. Thank you for coming, and thank you for sharing the word with us this morning. So I'll invite him to come. Actually, first we'll have the reading, and then we'll invite him to come.
Good morning, ICB. And today our first reading is book John, chapter 12, verses 1 to 11. John 12, verses 1 to 11. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. Meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there and came, not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well. For on account of him, many of Jews were going over to Jesus and believing in him. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
We're going to be looking over today. But this is an amazing story, don't you agree? John is so specific. He gives time, specific time. He gives specific place and specific people who are involved in this story. And I would like to start kind of from the back story. Not long ago, Jesus had raised his friend Lazarus from the dead. And it was a miracle that haven't been done. I mean, it was done in the Old Testament, but at that time, it was amazing. And because the main crowd there was Jews who were Sadducees, who did not believe in resurrection, it was outstanding, and that's why they gathered there planning to kill Jesus and Lazarus, because it was going along with what they believed. And so, probably to show the gratitude, the family of Lazarus, they invited Jesus over, and they prepared meal. And during this meal, this story had happened, which is very interesting to me. If you look at people who were gathered there, it was disciples and Jesus. Probably men were sitting and eating, and women were serving. Martha, as usual, being busy with serving. And Jesus was there. 6 days before the Passover, he already knew what's going to happen after that he's going to be betrayed and he's going to be killed. But they all gather there to have fellowship. And I think to us here in Kyrgyzstan, it's very common to have big feasts and people eating and celebrating something. We just had Nowruz. Probably a lot of you are attending some sort of a feast or big meal. And other Gospels say that it was the house of Simon the leper also, which is, to me, it's a very interesting fact, because probably it was the person who Jesus also healed. He had the leprosy, and I don't think it was just a coincidence that he got the nickname leper. And during this time, a very interesting thing happens. Mary, she takes a bottle of very expensive perfume. Judas here says that it was worth a year's wages. Everybody can probably count how much money it would cost today. But it was very, very precious. And what she does has an outstanding meaning, because she breaks the bottle, she unties her hair, and she starts wiping Jesus' feet with it. And of course, it creates a reaction. In Matthew 26:8 says that not only Judas, but all disciples, they were outraged because it was a waste. It was waste of resources, maybe. It was waste of something that could have been put to use for something good, like feeding the poor people. But to Mary, it had a different meaning, and to Jesus as well. So let's look back at several verses. Verse 3, it says, Mary took about a pint, which probably was around half a liter, of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of perfume. Can you imagine being in that room? I was trying to, this morning, imagine what it would be like to be in that room where everything has such a wonderful aroma. But that's what it is to be in that moment with Jesus. And there's 3 reasons why it's remarkable. First of all, it was usual to wash people's feet when they come in for a dinner, but to do it during the dinner, it is kind of weird. Second, it was not accustomed to wash people's feet with perfume. Usually people would use water and they wash people's feet. And third, it's remarkable because she did it with her hair. A woman would never let down her hair in the presence of another man. It would consider it a bad gesture. But it shows far more than we can imagine. First of all, it was a very humble gift. Mary knew who Jesus was to her. Not only she was at his feet before, but every time we find Mary, she was always at Jesus' feet. And it's a place of humility. Can you imagine sitting at the feet of someone? It's a very humble place to find yourself. And oftentimes, we elevate ourselves. We want to be like disciples. Who's going to sit at the right hand of Jesus or the left hand of Jesus? But Mary always finds herself at Jesus' feet because that's the place of humility and comfort. And it was an extreme gift. It was a remarkably extreme gesture because it was a lot of oil, very expensive oil. People used that oil as a bank, sort of. So they would, over time, they would buy a little bit more, because you can sell it if you need money later. It's kind of like investment. And Judas was right. He estimated it as an investment, as a bank of money. And not only because he was a thief and was stealing stuff little by little, but, he just looked at the resource and he said, it's very valuable, why waste it? And another reason why this action was remarkable is because it was not self-conscious. We are often very conscious what people think of us. If we serve God, what would people think of us if we do this? What would people say if I do this for Jesus? But for Mary, she didn't care about anyone's opinion, because she knew in her heart what was right for her to do. She didn't care about what people say, and she showed it by untying her hair and wiping Jesus' feet with her hair. And it is an example of very deep devotion and worship. And so the story, it brings us, first of all, to Jesus' feet. My question today for us, do we find ourselves at the feet of Jesus? If we do, how often? Do we Do we spend time with him like Mary did? Are we able or are we willing to spend our resources, maybe the most valuable possessions, to show worship and adoration towards God? And are we self-conscious when we serve God? Oftentimes it would be interesting, like you would hear stories of people, going somewhere and you see a nice person and you always wonder, is he a believer or he's just a nice person? And we are so secretive about who we are. But Mary, she didn't care. She wanted, to her, Jesus was the center of her universe, the center of her life. And she didn't care who or what they would say about her. And so we must find ourselves at the feet of Jesus. And I think we should do it daily. Do you have this quiet place where you can come before God and spend time with him at his feet? Maybe just saying nothing. It doesn't say that Mary said, hey, Jesus, here's the expensive perfume I have. I want to, break it and wipe your feet with my hair. She just came and she done it. And that's why this situation, this story is so outstanding, because she just went and she said she just did it because that's what was in her heart. And it's very interesting because Jesus' disciples did not see it like that. You would think like they've been with Jesus and he'd been teaching them about what worship is and how to pray and how to serve people, but they did not see it that way. And I think it's a reminder to us that when we call ourselves disciples of Jesus, when we call ourselves his followers, we are reminded of this story. I don't think it's a coincidence that we have this story today in the Bible, because God wants to remind us about how to be at his feet. Mark says that Jesus also actually replied that any time forever after this story, that this action of this woman will be remembered, and that's why we have it today. But disciples, they did not see it that way, especially Judas. John describes him as a person who would sometimes, he would keep the box with, donations and tithe, and he would sometimes take for his needs, and perhaps he did distribute some to the poor, but his heart was in a totally different place. Matthew says that other disciples were also outraged. They said, it's a waste. But are we those disciples at that moment? Or are we have the heart of Mary? Somebody said, when a man has gone so far in selfish greed that he left honesty behind him, no wonder the sight of self-surrendering love looks to him like a folly. Are we looking at other people's actions like it's a waste of their time for God or resources? Or are we like Mary? Because Jesus defended Mary. He said, hey, leave her alone. She is doing the right thing. She does not criticize her any bit, because he saw how much she loved him. He saw what she did. And he says, leave her alone in the verse 7, because it is intended, it was planned that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. Can you imagine? I don't know if Mary, when she starts saving the perfume, she realized that this is going to be for Jesus' burial. She probably was just saving it for some good use, maybe later. But when she met Jesus, she said, this is what the purpose of this oil is. And Jesus saw it. And he says, you will always have poor among you, but you will not always have me. And it's true. It's very interesting that you often meet people who have needs, and you are so focused in their needs that you put Jesus kind of behind you. Jesus said, I'm not going to be always with you, but you're going to always have poor. You're going to always have people whom you can serve. You can always have people who you can put your resources into, but do you do it for your God as well? Yeah, he said, this woman's action will be remembered every time this gospel is preached. And to me, it's very, very powerful testimony of how somebody's life can be changed. Now, I know I'm not saying anything new, but it is good for us to be always reminded of what Mary did and compare ourselves to her. No matter where you are with your walk with God, can you look at Mary today and say, hey, am I at that right place at the feet of Jesus, or am I like all the disciples who know a lot, who probably can do a lot, but didn't see that closeness? Most of all, it was a very extravagant act of love. And I would like to read another story. It's in the next chapter, also 11 verses. So I would like to invite Zamira again to read it.
Yeah, our next reading is Book John, chapter 13, verses 1 to 11. 13, verses 1 to 11. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water in the basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." "Then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Jesus answered, "Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you." For he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said not everyone was clean. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
So another story of somebody washing somebody's feet. Now this time, it's not Mary, but it's Jesus. We read the story again many times, and actually at the seminary here, they have very amazing tradition when every time somebody graduates, the teachers or the pastors, they come and they wash students' feet. And we are doing it because Jesus showed us an example how to do it. So, again, Jesus and disciples. And the verse 1 has important words in there. It says, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. This is another action of love. Jesus didn't just preach love, he was love, and he showed love, he acted lovingly. And again, the same crowd, disciples, they're gathering together, and all of a sudden, their teacher, their master, he takes off his garment and he starts washing their feet and wiping their feet. John says that the heart of Judas was already to betray Jesus. And perhaps maybe everything Jesus did these days before his crucifixion made Judas more and more disappointed in Jesus. And he already made up his mind to betray Jesus. And now again, his master all of a sudden showing some sort of a weakness. Because in the Jewish culture, if you are a rabbi, if you're a teacher, you could basically go and tell people what to do, not wash their feet. So maybe for Judas, it was this is not the Messiah that I want. But the interesting story is the other one with Peter, and that's what I would like to look closely at. And John describes it in a very details. The meal was in progress, and Jesus knew that Father had put all the things under his power. And so during the meal, he starts washing the feet. Is there anyone, have you ever washed somebody's feet or somebody washed your feet? No. I'm surprised. Oh, yes. It's very awkward, would you say? I'm not saying you washing your children's feet when they're little, but when another adult washes another adult's feet, it's an awkward situation to be in. We all kind of oh, no, don't do it. And that's what exactly Peter did. I don't know, maybe Peter thought Jesus wants us to protest. He's showing us, he's teaching us another parable. He's telling us, no, he's a teacher and he's washing our feet, so we should protest. And maybe that's why Peter is saying that, no, Lord, you will not wash my feet. Have you ever said no to God? I know many of us do, often. When God tells us to do something or he is trying to do something, and we say, no, I am not worthy. Or no, you are God and who am I? But I think a lot of times we are Peter. No wonder we are disciples of Jesus, because we still have a lot to learn. And Peter said, no, are you going to wash my feet? And Jesus said, you do not realize what I'm doing now, but later you will understand. And this is so character of Jesus. Oftentimes, he does something in our lives or in our friends' lives, and we don't understand why he's doing it. And we start opposing Jesus and saying, no, you should not do this. No, this is not how it should be. It doesn't make sense. But God is always doing something, and he's always going to help us to understand what's going on. And so Peter said, you shall never wash my feet. He didn't just say no thank you. He actually actively opposes God. To which Jesus replied, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. And that's, a rough situation. All the disciples, as disciples of Jesus, we always want to be with God. We always want him to think the best of us, even though we often fail, like Peter, to understand what God is doing in our lives. But Jesus wanted to teach them how to serve one another. We have here two stories, actually. There are two commandments. First one of Mary showing her love and adoration to God. Jesus said, the first commandment is to love God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul. And the second one is to love your neighbor as yourself. And this is an example of love that Jesus shows to his followers, his disciples. Do we oppose God when he is trying to show us love? Or do we oppose each other when somebody is trying to show us love? I often feel very uncomfortable when somebody's trying to bless me. Not financially, but just with some work or some help. I feel awkward because I feel, no, I did not deserve this. And we often are like that. We're opposing what God is trying to do in our lives. Like Peter was saying, no, you will never do this. I am not worthy, I'm not deserve it. But Jesus wanted to show something. And he said, unless I wash you, you cannot be a part of me. You cannot have part of me. And it's very important because Peter had to accept what Jesus was doing. He had to accept everything or he would have nothing. We cannot accept Jesus' cleansing of us if we don't want to do everything that he does on his terms. And so Peter then replies in a very Peter way. Then Jesus washed everything. If you say so, if you say this, then wash everything. I need it all. And that's totally us, right? We often go from one extreme with God to another. We Sometimes we say, no, God, I will not do it. And then when we humbled and Jesus shows us what he's going to do, we run ahead of him and trying to do, not only let him work, but also do his work instead of him. I love Jesus because he had probably a very interesting stories that were not written. Like John said, there's so many stories that could not fill all the books in the world. But it's very interesting. Then when I look at my friends or myself with God, I see how I am sometimes Peter, and sometimes I'm John and James, and wondering where am I at Jesus' side. Sometimes I'm Mary. And it's very important, at least, to see and find ourselves and then to accept what Jesus is trying to do. Jesus said to him when Peter said, washed everything, my head and my hands. And Jesus answered that those who have had bath only need to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you. And we're so happy to say, Jesus knew that this was just him showing an action of love and an action of how to serve each other. And he puts Peter in the right place. And he says, hey, Peter, I know you want to run ahead, I know you're passionate about me, though he's kind of like changing waves sometimes. But he says, those who are clean only need their feet washed. And because he just wanted to show their love, his love for their disciples. And so these two stories, again, I would like to come back to right now. They are amazing. I want us to think for a little bit, and we're going to have a small time of prayer in a little bit, but just think, where are you today in your walk with God? Can you find yourself at Jesus' feet like Mary did? Are you like Peter maybe, that you are, saying no to Jesus and he's trying to do something in your life? Or are you like Peter who says, no, Jesus, wash me everything. I want to help you. Where are you in your walk with God? And a second question I have, where are we all together with our obeying God's commands, loving him and loving our neighbor? And maybe you have someone in your life that you've been wanting to actually go and, serve like Jesus served his disciples. Or maybe you know someone who actually needs to come to Jesus and just be at his feet. You can be that vessel of encouragement. You can be that vessel of, bringing someone to the feet of Jesus, or maybe come yourself. So can we spend just 5 minutes in silence and listening to God? I know it's also awkward, but this is something that I feel very important that we need to ask ourselves today. Lord Jesus, we thank you for your peace. And we thank you that you are the one who actually speak in peace. And I pray that you would just give the comfort and encouragement, like we pray, to those who need it tonight, this morning. And Jesus, we thank you that at your feet we can find that peace. Lord, I'm grateful that you're a God who is not ashamed of us when we act not how you want us to act, but you actually want to teach us how to live a life that is glorifying to you. And Lord, I just pray that you would teach us how to be at your feet more, how to quiet down our life, how to quiet down everything that we feel like could be done or needs to be done, and just spend time with you. Lord, I'm thankful that you have fully washed us with your blood, that you took away every sin. Lord, I'm thankful that you invite us into your presence. I'm thankful that there's always time. You always have time for us. And God, I pray for your church here in Kyrgyzstan, that you would always be our focus. No matter where we are, Lord, I pray that you would help us to just come before you at your feet. As a church, as your body, Jesus, I pray that we would be Mary. We would be forsaking everything just to be with you. Lord, I pray for my brothers and sisters today. Lord, I pray that you would give that time where they be in your presence and they would just be in this aroma of your presence. Help us to worship you. Help us to glorify you with every cell in our body. And I pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen. Thank you.